The morning sun painted the sky orange and pink above Riverside Park. Marcus Rodriguez sat on his usual bench, watching the city wake up around him. His hands held a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He did not mind the taste. After 12 years in the military, he had learned to be grateful for what he had. Marcus was 45 years old, but he looked older. His dark hair was turning gray at the sides. Lines marked his face from years of squinting in the desert sun. His clothes were clean but worn thin. His boots had holes in them, but he kept them polished. Old habits die hard. 3 months ago, Marcus had lived in a small apartment across town. He had a job at a warehouse, moving boxes and driving trucks. The work was simple, and his boss liked him. Marcus always showed up on time. He worked hard and never complained. But then the nightmares got worse. The nightmares came from his time in Afghanistan and Iraq. He had served 4 tours overseas. He had seen things that no person should see. He had lost friends, good men who would never come home to their families. The doctors at the VA hospital called it PTSD. They gave him pills and told him to talk to someone. But the pills made him feel strange, and talking did not bring his friends back. The nightmares made it hard to sleep. When Marcus did not sleep, he could not focus at work. He started making mistakes. He dropped things. He forgot orders. One day, he snapped at a customer who was being rude. His boss called him into the office. "Marcus, I like you," his boss had said, "but you need help. Take some time off. Get yourself right. Your job will be here when you come back." Marcus knew his boss meant well, but time off meant no money. No money meant no rent. Marcus had some savings, but they did not last long. He applied for help from the VA, but the paperwork was confusing. The offices were busy. People put him on hold for hours. They transferred him from person to person. Everyone wanted different forms. Everyone had different requirements. Marcus had been proud his whole life. He did not like asking for help. He had always taken care of himself. In the military, he had taken care of others, too. He had been a Navy SEAL, one of the best soldiers in the world. He had jumped from planes and swum through dark waters. He had saved lives and protected his country. But now he could not even protect his own apartment. When the eviction notice came, Marcus packed his few belongings into a backpack. He took his clothes, his sleeping bag, and a small American flag that had been folded at his father's funeral. His father had also been a soldier. Marcus thought his father would understand why he ended up on the streets. Riverside Park became his home. It was not a bad place to sleep. There were trees for shade and bathrooms that stayed open late. The police did not bother people much during the day. At night, Marcus found quiet spots where he could spread his sleeping bag without being seen. Marcus kept to a routine. Every morning he woke up before dawn. He folded his sleeping bag and packed his things. He walked to the gas station on 5th Street and bought coffee with the coins he found or the dollars people sometimes gave him. He never asked for money, but sometimes people left it anyway. After coffee, Marcus walked through the city. He looked for work, but most places wanted an address. They wanted references. They wanted someone who looked successful. Marcus still walked straight and kept his shoulders back like a soldier, but his clothes told a different story. In the afternoons, Marcus returned to the park. He sat on his bench and watched people walk by. Mothers pushed baby strollers. Children played on swings. Old men fed birds. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone had someone waiting for them. Marcus had no one. He had a sister in California, but they had not spoken in years. She had her own family and her own problems. Marcus did not want to burden her with his troubles. He had friends from the military, but most of them lived far away. Some of them had their own struggles. War changed everyone who touched it. Marcus tried to stay positive. He told himself this was temporary. He would get back on his feet. He would find work and get an apartment. He would put his life back together. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, hope became harder to hold on to. The other homeless people in the area knew Marcus was different. He did not drink or use drugs. He did not cause trouble or start fights. He shared his food when he had extra. He helped old Frank fix his shopping cart when the wheel broke. He gave his jacket to Maria when the temperature dropped suddenly one night. "You are not like the rest of us," Frank told him one evening. Frank had been on the streets for 10 years. He knew everyone and everything that happened in the neighborhood. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "You still got that soldier thing about you," Frank said. "The way you sit up straight, the way you keep your stuff organized. Most of us, we give up after a while. But you are still fighting something." Frank was right. Marcus was fighting. He fought the voices in his head that told him he was worthless. He fought the memories that came at night. He fought the feeling that he had failed everyone who had ever believed in him. Most of all, he fought the urge to just give up and let the streets swallow him whole. The hardest part was the looks people gave him. When Marcus walked down the street, people crossed to the other side. They acted like being homeless was contagious. They did not see the man who had jumped into enemy fire to save his fellow soldiers. They did not see the son who had held his mother's hand when she died. They just saw a bum who had made bad choices. Marcus understood their fear. Before he became homeless, he had probably looked at people like himself the same way. It was easier to believe that homeless people were lazy or crazy or criminal. It was harder to accept that anyone could end up on the streets, that a few bad breaks, a little bad luck, and a system that did not care could destroy a life. But Marcus knew the truth now. He knew that the distance between having a home and sleeping on a bench was much smaller than people wanted to believe. He knew that dignity was something you carried inside yourself, not something that came from having an address or a job title. As the sun set over Riverside Park, Marcus prepared for another night. He found his usual spot behind the maintenance building where the security lights did not reach. He spread his sleeping bag on the ground and used his backpack as a pillow. Above him, the stars were barely visible through the city lights. Marcus closed his eyes and tried not to think about his warm bed in his old apartment. He tried not to think about the friends he had lost in the war. He tried not to think about the life he used to have. Instead, he focused on tomorrow. Tomorrow, he would get up and try again. Tomorrow, he would keep fighting. It was what soldiers did. He did not know that his fight was about to get much harder. He did not know that 2 corrupt police officers had noticed him. He did not know that they saw him as an easy target for their schemes. Marcus Rodriguez, decorated Navy SEAL and American hero, was about to become the victim of the very system he had sworn to protect. Officer Jake Morrison walked his beat with the swagger of a man who owned the streets. He had been a cop for 8 years, but he had been corrupt for almost 7 of them. It started small, like it always did. A free meal here, a small favor there. But money was addictive, and Morrison discovered he had a taste for it. His partner, Detective Carl Brennan, was the one who showed him the ropes. Brennan had been dirty for 15 years. He knew which businesses would pay for protection. He knew which drug dealers would share their profits to avoid arrest. He knew how to make evidence disappear and how to make innocent people look guilty. Together, Morrison and Brennan ran their own little kingdom in the east side of the city. Store owners paid them monthly fees to avoid harassment. Drug dealers gave them a cut of their sales. When they needed to make their arrest numbers look good, they found easy targets: homeless people, drug addicts, people with no connections and no one to speak for them. The homeless camp in Riverside Park had been good to them over the years. When they needed a quick arrest, they could always find someone there to pin a crime on. Most of the homeless people were too scared or too broken to fight back. They would take a plea deal and disappear into the system. No one asked questions. No one cared. But lately, Morrison had noticed a new face in the park. A Hispanic man in his 40s who did not fit the usual pattern. The man was clean. He sat up straight. He did not beg or bother people. Morrison had watched him for weeks, waiting for him to slip up. But the man never caused trouble. He never even jaywalked. "We need to do something about the new guy," Morrison told Brennan as they sat in their patrol car. They were parked outside Tony's Deli, where the owner gave them free sandwiches every day. It was another small corruption that had become routine. "What new guy?" Brennan asked, taking a bite of his meatball sub. "The one in the park. The clean one. He has been there for months, and he has not caused any problems. That makes me nervous." Brennan understood. People who did not cause problems were dangerous to their operation. If someone was watching the area and reporting back to social services or the media, it could expose their activities. Better to get rid of potential witnesses before they became actual problems. "What do you want to do?" Brennan asked. "Same thing we always do. Plant some dope on him and run him through the system. A few months in county jail will either break him or teach him to keep his mouth shut." Brennan nodded. They had done this dozens of times before. It was almost routine now. Find a target. Plant evidence, make an arrest, collect overtime pay for the paperwork and court appearances. Sometimes the person would fight the charges, but it never mattered. Who was a judge? Going to believe? 2 police officers or a homeless drug addict? That evening, Morrison and Brennan drove to Riverside Park. They spotted Marcus sitting on his usual bench, reading a book he had found in a trash can. The book was about military history. Marcus read slowly, running his finger under each line. Reading helped him focus his mind and forget about his troubles for a while. Morrison parked the patrol car and got out. He adjusted his gun belt and put on his most intimidating expression. Brennan followed, carrying a small plastic bag in his pocket. The bag contained 3 grams of cocaine that they had taken from a drug bust last month. Instead of putting it in evidence, they had kept it for situations like this. "Evening," Morrison said, walking up to Marcus. His voice was loud and aggressive, designed to attract attention and make the homeless man nervous. Marcus looked up from his book. "Good evening, officer," he said politely. He closed the book and set it beside him on the bench. His hands were visible and still. He looked directly at Morrison without being challenging or disrespectful. Morrison was surprised by Marcus's calm response. Most homeless people either cowered or got defensive when approached by police. This man acted like he was used to dealing with authority figures, like he respected the uniform but was not afraid of it. "We got a report of drug dealing in this area," Morrison said. "Someone matching your description." Marcus's eyebrows went up slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that, officer. I have not seen any drug activity in this area. The people here mostly keep to themselves. Is that right?" Morrison moved closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "Well, I think we need to take a look at your stuff. You got any problem with that?" "No, sir," Marcus said. He stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. "My belongings are right here." He gestured to his backpack, which sat neatly beside the bench. Brennan positioned himself behind Marcus while Morrison opened the backpack. Inside were clothes, a sleeping bag, some personal items, and the small American flag. Everything was organized and clean. Morrison felt around in the bag, pretending to search while actually feeling for the best place to plant the cocaine. "You mind stepping back a bit?" Morrison said to Marcus. "Give us some room to work." Marcus took 2 steps back. He watched the officers with calm interest, like he was curious about their procedure. He did not look worried or guilty. He looked like a man who had nothing to hide. That was when Brennan made his move. While Marcus was focused on Morrison, Brennan slipped the cocaine out of his pocket and dropped it into the sleeping bag. It was a move he had practiced dozens of times. Quick and smooth, impossible to see unless you were looking for it. "Well, well, well," Morrison said, pulling the bag out of the sleeping bag. "What do we have here?" Marcus stared at the bag in complete shock. His mouth fell open. His eyes went wide. For the first time since they had approached him, he looked genuinely rattled. "That is not mine," Marcus said. His voice was steady but confused. "I have never seen that before in my life." "Sure you have not," Brennan said with a smirk. "That is what they all say. Officers, I swear to you I do not use drugs. I have never used drugs. That bag is not mine." Marcus's voice remained respectful, but there was an edge of desperation creeping in. Morrison enjoyed this part. The moment when the target realized they were trapped. The moment when they understood that their word meant nothing against police testimony. It was a feeling of power that Morrison had become addicted to. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Morrison ordered. Marcus complied immediately. His military training had taught him to follow orders from legitimate authority, even when those orders seemed wrong. As Morrison put the handcuffs on him, Marcus tried one more time to explain. "Officers, there has been a mistake. I am a veteran. I served 12 years in the Navy. I would never—" "Shut up," Morrison interrupted. "Save it for the judge." As they walked Marcus to the patrol car, Brennan leaned close to Morrison's ear. "We need to add some charges," he whispered. "Make it stick better." Morrison nodded. When they got to the police station, they would write up a report claiming that Marcus had resisted arrest. They would say he tried to run. They would say he took a swing at Morrison. It was all lies, but it would make the drug charge more believable. Who would question why a drug dealer might fight back when caught? The ride to the station was quiet. Marcus sat in the back seat, still trying to process what had happened. He had been arrested before, once for a bar fight when he was 19, before he joined the military. But that had been different. He had actually done something wrong. This time he was completely innocent, and somehow that made it worse. At the station, Morrison and Brennan processed Marcus like any other arrest. They took his fingerprints and his photo. They searched him again and confiscated his few possessions. They put him in a holding cell with 3 other men who had been arrested that night. Marcus sat on the metal bench and stared at the floor. He tried to understand what had just happened to him. He had been minding his own business, reading a book, when 2 police officers had planted drugs on him. It seemed impossible, but there was no other explanation. The other men in the cell were career criminals. They knew the system and accepted it as part of their lives. They looked at Marcus and saw fresh meat, someone new to abuse or rob. But something about Marcus's posture warned them away. Even in jail clothes, even falsely accused, Marcus carried himself like a warrior. "First time?" asked one of the men, a thin guy with tattoos covering his arms. "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "What they get you for?" "They said I had drugs, but I did not." The tattooed man laughed. "Man, you got a lot to learn. In here, nobody is innocent. Everybody got framed. Everybody got set up. The sooner you accept that, the easier it gets." But Marcus could not accept it. He had spent his whole adult life serving his country. He had fought for justice and freedom. He had risked his life to protect the innocent. The idea that the police, the people he had sworn to protect, would frame him for a crime he did not commit was almost too much to bear. As the night wore on, Marcus lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his fellow soldiers who had died fighting for American values. He thought about the oath he had taken to defend the Constitution. He thought about all the times he had told himself that America was worth fighting for. Now he was beginning to understand what his homeless friends had tried to tell him. The system was not designed to help people like him. It was designed to use them, to chew them up and spit them out, to make examples of them when convenient and ignore them when not. But Marcus Rodriguez was not just anyone. Sarah Chen had been a public defender for 6 years. She had seen every kind of case and every kind of client: drug dealers, thieves, drunk drivers, and worse. Most of them were guilty. Most of them lied to her. Most of them just wanted to get the best deal they could and move on with their lives. When Sarah first met Marcus Rodriguez, She expected more of the same. His file looked typical. Homeless man arrested for drug possession. The police report said he tried to run and fought with the arresting officer. It was a story she had read hundreds of times before. But when Marcus walked into the meeting room at the county jail, Sarah immediately noticed something different about him. He walked straight and tall. His shoulders were back. When he sat down, he looked directly at her without the shifty eyes or defensive posture she was used to seeing. "Mr. Rodriguez," Sarah said, opening his file. "I am Sarah Chen, your public defender. I have reviewed your case, and I have to tell you, it looks pretty straightforward. The prosecution is offering a plea deal. 6 months in county jail with time served. You would probably be out in 3 months. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Miss Chen, I appreciate you taking my case, but I need you to understand something. I did not have any drugs. I have never used drugs in my life. Those officers planted that cocaine in my sleeping bag." Sarah sighed. She heard this claim at least once a week. Every drug user insisted they were innocent. Every dealer claimed they were set up. It was part of the process. Denial was easier than accepting responsibility. "Mr. Rodriguez, I understand this is difficult, but the police found drugs in your possession. They have the evidence. They have their testimony. Unless you can prove they planted the drugs, which is extremely difficult to do—" "I can prove it," Marcus interrupted. "Well, not prove it exactly, but I can show you that their story does not make sense." Something in Marcus's voice made Sarah look up from her notes. His tone was calm and confident, not desperate or angry like most innocent claims sounded. He spoke like a man who was used to analyzing problems and finding solutions. "Okay," Sarah said. "Tell me what happened." Marcus told her the whole story, how he had been sitting quietly, reading a book, how the officers approached him and searched his belongings, how he had cooperated completely, how he had never seen the cocaine before in his life. "You said you were reading?" Sarah asked. "Yes, ma'am. A book about World War II that I found in a trash can near the library." "And you have never been arrested before?" "Once when I was 19. A bar fight. That was before I joined the military." Sarah made a note. "How long were you in the military?" 12 years. I served in the Navy." "What did you do in the Navy?" Marcus hesitated. He had learned not to talk about his SEAL service. People either did not believe him, or they treated him like some kind of superhero. Both reactions made him uncomfortable. "I was in special operations," he said finally. Sarah looked up again. Something about the way Marcus sat, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself. It all started to make sense. This was not a typical homeless drug addict. This was a soldier. "Mr. Rodriguez, can you get your military records? I think they might be important for your case." "I can try. Most of my records are classified, but my discharge papers should show my service history." After Marcus left, Sarah could not stop thinking about their conversation. She had handled hundreds of drug cases, and they all followed similar patterns. But this case felt different. Marcus felt different. That evening, Sarah went back to Riverside Park. She wanted to see the scene where Marcus was arrested. She talked to some of the other homeless people in the area. They all said the same thing. Marcus never used drugs, never sold drugs, never caused any trouble. "That man is different," said an old woman named Betty, who slept near the bathroom building. "He helps people. He shares his food. He does not drink or do drugs. He reads books and keeps to himself." "The cop's been watching him for weeks," said another man named Frank. "They kept driving by, looking at him, like they were planning something." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors about corruption in that precinct. Nothing proven, nothing official, but whispers among the other public defenders. Stories about planted evidence and false arrests. Stories that were always dismissed because they came from criminals and drug addicts. But Marcus Rodriguez was not a career criminal. He was a veteran who had fallen on hard times. If he was telling the truth about being framed, it would be the first solid evidence of police corruption that Sarah had ever encountered. The next day, Sarah drove to the courthouse to review the evidence. She examined the cocaine that had supposedly been found in Marcus's sleeping bag. She read the police report more carefully. She noticed several small details that bothered her. First, the bag of cocaine was exactly 3 grams, not 2.9 or 3.2. Exactly 3. That was unusual. Most drug users bought drugs in round numbers, but they used some before getting caught. Dealers carried varying amounts depending on sales and supply. Second, the cocaine was very pure. Most street drugs were cut with other substances to increase profits. This cocaine was almost 90% pure, which meant it was probably evidence from another case rather than something bought on the street. Third, the police report claimed that Marcus tried to run when they found the drugs. But the arrest happened on a bench in the middle of an open park. There was nowhere to run, and Marcus's military training would have taught him that running from police was a bad idea. Sarah requested the body camera footage from both officers. The police department said there were technical problems with the cameras that night. Both officers' cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned at the exact time of the arrest. That was when Sarah knew she was dealing with something bigger than a simple drug case. She was dealing with police corruption, and Marcus Rodriguez was the victim. Sarah began digging deeper into Morrison and Brennan's arrest records. She discovered a pattern that made her stomach turn. Over the past 2 years, they had arrested an unusually high number of homeless people for drug possession. Almost always 3 grams of cocaine, almost always with charges of resisting arrest, almost always resulting in plea deals. She cross-referenced their arrests with crime statistics for the area. Drug crime had actually gone down in their district, but arrests had gone up. That suggested they were either very good at catching criminals or very good at creating criminals. Sarah also discovered that Morrison and Brennan worked a lot of overtime. They claimed overtime pay for court appearances, paperwork, and follow-up investigations. If they were making false arrests, they were also stealing money from the city. But proving corruption was different from suspecting it. Sarah needed more than patterns and coincidences. She needed evidence. She needed witnesses. Most importantly, she needed Marcus's military records. When the records arrived, Sarah could not believe what she was reading. Marcus Rodriguez was not just a veteran. He was a decorated war hero. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. He had received the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and multiple commendations for valor. But even more impressive than his medals was his service record. Marcus had been a Navy SEAL, one of the most elite fighting forces in the world. He had led rescue missions behind enemy lines. He had saved the lives of fellow soldiers. He had been wounded multiple times and had always returned to duty. The records also explained why Marcus had become homeless. He had been diagnosed with severe PTSD after losing several men under his command during his final deployment. The military doctors had recommended intensive therapy and medication, but the VA system was overwhelmed and Marcus had fallen through the cracks. Sarah realized she was not just defending a homeless man accused of drug possession. She was defending an American hero who had sacrificed everything for his country and had been abandoned by the system he had served. She also realized that she was probably in over her head. If Morrison and Brennan were willing to frame a decorated veteran, they would not hesitate to intimidate or threaten a public defender. Sarah needed help, and she needed it fast. Sarah called her former law school professor, who had connections with military advocacy groups. She also reached out to investigative journalists who specialized in police corruption. Most importantly, she contacted Marcus's former commanding officer, Colonel James Patterson. Colonel Patterson was shocked to learn about Marcus's situation. "Rodriguez was one of the finest soldiers I ever served with," he told Sarah over the phone. "If he is homeless and being accused of drug crimes, then our system has failed him completely. Colonel, would you be willing to testify on his behalf?" Ma'am, I would consider it an honor. Marcus Rodriguez saved my life and the lives of 8 other soldiers during an ambush in Kandahar province. If some corrupt cops think they can destroy this man's reputation, they have another thing coming. As Sarah prepared for trial, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had the evidence to prove Marcus's innocence and expose police corruption. She had character witnesses who could testify to Marcus's heroism and integrity. She had documentation showing the pattern of false arrests. But she also knew that Morrison and Brennan would not go down without a fight. They had 8 years of experience manipulating the system. The courthouse was busier than usual on the morning of Marcus Rodriguez's trial. Word had spread through the legal community that something big was happening. A homeless veteran was claiming that 2 police officers had framed him. If true, it would be the biggest police corruption case in years. Judge Catherine Williams entered the courtroom with her usual stern expression. She had been a judge for 15 years and had seen every kind of case. Before becoming a judge, she had served as a lawyer in the Army JAG Corps. She understood military culture and respected those who had served their country. The prosecution team was led by Assistant District Attorney Michael Foster. Foster was young and ambitious. He saw this case as an easy win that would look good on his record. A homeless drug addict claiming police misconduct. It was the kind of desperate defense that juries rejected every day. Sarah Chen sat at the defense table next to Marcus. She had barely slept the night before, going over her notes and preparing for every possible attack on her case. She knew this trial would make or break her career. More importantly, it would determine whether an innocent man went to prison. Marcus wore the only clean clothes he owned, a white shirt and dark pants that Sarah had brought him. Even in simple civilian clothes, he carried himself with military bearing. His back was straight, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He looked like a soldier facing a court-martial, not a criminal facing trial. The prosecution may present its opening statement, Judge Williams announced. Foster stood up and walked toward the jury. He was confident and polished, everything a prosecutor should be. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a simple case. The defendant, Marcus Rodriguez, was caught with illegal drugs in his possession. When confronted by police officers, he resisted arrest and assaulted an officer. The evidence is clear. The testimony is straightforward. The defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Foster spent 20 minutes laying out the prosecution's case. He described how officers Morrison and Brennan were doing their jobs, protecting the community from drug dealers. He painted Marcus as a dangerous criminal who had chosen a life of drugs over responsibility. When Foster finished, Sarah stood up for her opening statement. She walked slowly toward the jury, making eye contact with each member. Her voice was steady but passionate. Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to hear about one of the worst injustices I have ever encountered. Marcus Rodriguez is not a drug dealer. He is not a criminal. He is an American hero who served his country with distinction for 12 years. He is a Navy SEAL who risked his life to save others. And he has been framed by corrupt police officers who saw him as an easy target. Sarah could see surprise on the faces of the jury members. They had been expecting to hear about a typical drug case, not corruption and heroism. During this trial, you will learn that Mr. Rodriguez has never used drugs in his life. You will learn that he has no criminal history since becoming an adult. You will learn that he served multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, earning the Silver Star and 3 Purple Hearts. You will learn that 2 police officers planted drugs on him because they thought no one would believe a homeless man over 2 officers in uniform. The prosecution's case began with Officer Morrison taking the stand. He looked professional in his dress uniform, with his medals and commendations prominently displayed. Foster led him through his testimony with practiced ease. Officer Morrison, please tell the jury what happened on the night in question. Morrison had told this story so many times that it felt natural. My partner and I received a report of drug activity in Riverside Park. We approached the defendant, who was acting suspiciously. When we asked to search his belongings, he became agitated and nervous. What did you find during the search? We found 3 grams of cocaine hidden in his sleeping bag. When we told him he was under arrest, he tried to run. When I attempted to stop him, he swung at me with his fist. And how did you respond? We used the minimum force necessary to subdue him and place him under arrest. Foster nodded with satisfaction. The testimony was clean and professional. Morrison came across as a dedicated officer doing a difficult job. When Sarah's turn came, to cross-examine Morrison, she approached slowly. She had learned in law school that aggressive cross-examinations could backfire with juries. Better to let the witness hang himself with his own words. Officer Morrison, you said Mr. Rodriguez was acting suspiciously. Can you describe exactly what he was doing that seemed suspicious? Morrison hesitated for just a moment. He was sitting on a bench in an area known for drug activity. Sitting on a bench. Was he talking to anyone? No. Was he exchanging anything? With anyone? No. Was he holding anything that looked like drugs or drug paraphernalia? Not that I could see. So his suspicious behavior was sitting quietly on a bench reading a book? Foster objected before Morrison could answer. Leading the witness, Your Honor. Sustained, Judge Williams said. But the jury had gotten the point. Sarah continued her questioning, focusing on the details of the search. She got Morrison to admit that Marcus had been cooperative and polite. She got him to admit that Marcus had not tried to hide his belongings or prevent the search. Officer Morrison, you testified that Mr. Rodriguez tried to run when you arrested him. Where exactly did he try to run to? Morrison looked uncomfortable. He tried to get away from us. The arrest took place in the middle of an open park, correct? With no buildings or cover nearby? Yes. And Mr. Rodriguez is a 45-year-old man who has been living on the streets for months. You and your partner are trained police officers, in good physical condition. Where exactly did you think he was going to run to? Morrison's story was starting to sound less believable. Sarah could see doubt creeping into the faces of some jury members. Detective Brennan's testimony was similar to Morrison's, but Sarah noticed small inconsistencies. Brennan said Marcus was agitated from the beginning, while Morrison had said he became agitated during the search. Brennan said Marcus swung with his right hand, while Morrison had not specified which hand. These were minor details, but Sarah knew that honest witnesses rarely had perfectly coordinated stories. Liars, on the other hand, often rehearsed their testimonies until they matched exactly. The prosecution's case was completed in one day. Foster was confident that he had proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. 2 police officers had testified consistently about finding drugs and being assaulted. What more could a jury need? Sarah began the defense case the next morning. Her first witness was Frank, the homeless man who had lived in Riverside Park for 10 years. Frank was nervous about testifying, but he told the truth about what he had seen. I've been watching them cops for weeks, Frank said. They kept driving by, looking at Marcus, like they was planning something. Marcus never caused no trouble. He helped people. He shared his food. He did not do drugs. Foster objected that Frank's testimony was speculation and hearsay. Judge Williams sustained some of the objections, but allowed Frank to testify about his direct observations. Sarah's next witness was Betty, the elderly homeless woman who slept near the park bathrooms. Betty testified that she had never seen Marcus with drugs or drug users. She said he kept to himself and read books. That man got dignity, Betty said. He talks different than the rest of us, like he got education, like he used to be somebody important. The prosecution attacked both Frank and Betty as unreliable witnesses. Foster pointed out their criminal records and suggested they were lying to protect a friend. It was a predictable strategy, but effective with some juries. Sarah's most important witness was Colonel James Patterson, Marcus's former commanding officer. Patterson appeared via video link from his office at the Pentagon. He wore his dress uniform with full decorations. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the courtroom. Colonel Patterson, Sarah began. How long have you known Marcus? Rodriguez? I served with Petty Officer Rodriguez for 4 years. He was under my command during 3 deployments to Afghanistan. Can you describe his character and service record? Patterson's voice was strong and clear. Marcus Rodriguez is one of the finest soldiers I have ever had the privilege to command. He is honest, brave, and dedicated. He saved my life and the lives of 8 other soldiers during an ambush in Kandahar province. He was wounded 3 times and always returned to duty. He earned the Silver Star for gallantry and 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat. The courtroom was completely silent. Even Foster looked impressed, despite himself. Colonel, in your opinion, is Marcus Rodriguez the type of person who would use or sell illegal drugs? Absolutely not. Marcus Rodriguez has always lived by the highest moral standards. He does not drink alcohol to excess. He has never used tobacco. The idea that he would use illegal drugs is completely contrary to everything I know about his character. Foster's cross-examination of Colonel Patterson was brief and respectful. He could not attack a decorated colonel without looking unpatriotic. Instead, he focused on the time that had passed since Patterson had served with Marcus. Colonel, when was the last time you had direct contact with Mr. Rodriguez? About 3 years ago, when he was discharged from the Navy. And you have no personal knowledge of his activities since then? That is correct. The courtroom erupted in whispers and murmurs as the jury's verdict echoed through the chamber. Marcus Rodriguez sat perfectly still, his military training keeping his emotions in check, even as relief flooded through him. Sarah Chen squeezed his shoulder, tears forming in her eyes. They had won, but she could sense that Judge Williams was not finished. Judge Catherine Williams raised her hand for silence. Her face was stern, and her eyes burned with an anger that made everyone in the courtroom pay attention. She had been taking careful notes throughout the trial, and the evidence she had heard troubled her deeply. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service. You are dismissed. Judge Williams waited until the jury had filed out before continuing. However, this court is not finished with this matter. Officer Morrison and Detective Brennan shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected to be disappointed by the verdict, but they had not expected what was coming next. Judge Williams turned to face Marcus directly. Mr. Rodriguez, would you please stand? Marcus rose to his feet, his posture straight and military. He had no idea what was happening, but he was prepared to face whatever came next. Mr. Rodriguez, I have served as a judge for 15 years. Before that, I served as a lawyer in the Army JAG Corps for 8 years. In all that time, I have never encountered a case that disturbed me more than this one. Judge Williams paused, looking around the courtroom. You are a decorated war hero who served this country with distinction. You earned the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and the respect of your fellow soldiers. When you needed help from the country you served, that country failed you. Marcus remained silent, but his eyes showed surprise. Judges rarely made speeches like this, Judge Williams continued. But even worse than that failure is what happened to you in this courtroom. 2 police officers sworn to protect and serve planted evidence on you. They lied under oath. They tried to send an innocent man to prison to cover up their crimes. The judge turned to look directly at Morrison and Brennan. Both officers had gone pale. They were beginning to understand that their troubles were just beginning. Officers Morrison and Brennan, I am ordering an immediate investigation into your conduct. I am referring this matter to the Internal Affairs Division, the District Attorney's Office, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The evidence presented in this trial suggests a pattern of corruption that may involve multiple cases and multiple victims. Foster, the prosecutor, stood up quickly. Your Honor, if I may... You may not, Judge Williams cut him off sharply. Mr. Foster, your office will cooperate fully with all investigations. I am also ordering a review of every arrest made by these 2 officers in the past 5 years. If other innocent people have been framed, they deserve justice. The judge turned back to Marcus. Mr. Rodriguez, I want to ask you something. and I want you to answer honestly. What was your rank and unit in the Navy?" Marcus hesitated. He was not used to discussing his military service in detail. "Your Honor, I was a petty officer first class. I served with SEAL Team 3. "And your decorations?" "Silver Star for gallantry in action, 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, several campaign and service ribbons." Judge Williams nodded slowly. She had suspected as much from the testimony, but hearing it directly from Marcus made it even more powerful. "Mr. Rodriguez, would you recite your service history for this court?" Marcus was confused by the request, but he complied. "Marcus Rodriguez, Petty Officer First Class, United States Navy SEAL, 4 deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, 12 years of active duty service. Honorable discharge due to combat-related post-traumatic stress disorder." As Marcus spoke, something remarkable began to happen. Judge Williams stood up slowly and came to attention. Her military training took over, and she rendered a crisp salute to Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the courtroom, "you are in the presence of an American hero." Colonel Patterson, still connected via video link, immediately stood and saluted. Sarah Chen placed her hand over her heart. Several people in the gallery, including some court officers, rose to their feet. Marcus was stunned. He had not been saluted or honored for his service since leaving the military. Tears formed in his eyes as he returned Judge Williams's salute, with military precision. The moment was broken by the sound of handcuffs clicking. 2 FBI agents had quietly entered the courtroom during the judge's speech. They walked directly to Morrison and Brennan. "Officers Morrison and Brennan," one of the agents announced, "you are under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, perjury, and evidence tampering." Morrison jumped to his feet. "This is ridiculous. We were doing our jobs. This homeless junkie has you all fooled." Judge Williams's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Officer Morrison, you will address this court and this veteran with respect, or I will hold you in contempt." As the FBI agents led Morrison and Brennan away in handcuffs, Judge Williams addressed the courtroom one final time. "This case represents both the worst and the best of our justice system. The worst is represented by 2 corrupt officers who abused their power and betrayed their oaths. The best is represented by Mr. Rodriguez, who served his country honorably, and by Ms. Chen, who fought tirelessly for justice." She turned to Marcus again. "Mr. Rodriguez, this court owes you an apology. Your country owes you an apology. You should never have been in this situation. You should never have been homeless. You should never have been arrested on false charges." Judge Williams paused, then made an announcement that surprised everyone in the courtroom. "Effective immediately, I am establishing a veterans advocacy program in this courthouse. Any veteran facing criminal charges will be connected with specialized resources and support. We will ensure that no veteran is abandoned by the system they served." She looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Rodriguez, I am personally going to make sure you get the help you deserve. The VA owes you proper treatment for your PTSD. The city owes you housing assistance. Most importantly, this country owes you the respect and support that should have been provided from the beginning." After court was adjourned, Marcus found himself surrounded by people wanting to help. A reporter approached him for an interview. A local veterans organization offered him temporary housing. A law firm offered to represent him in a civil rights lawsuit against the police department. Sarah Chen stayed by his side, helping him navigate the sudden attention. "How are you feeling?" she asked him as they walked out of the courthouse. Marcus thought for a moment. "Grateful," he said finally. "For the first time in months, I feel like people see me as a human being instead of just a homeless man." 3 months later, Marcus's life had changed dramatically. The civil rights lawsuit against the police department resulted in a settlement that provided him with enough money to get back on his feet. More importantly, it funded the veterans advocacy program that Judge Williams had established. Marcus found an apartment in a quiet neighborhood near the VA hospital. He began receiving proper treatment for his PTSD from doctors who understood combat trauma. He started volunteer work with other homeless veterans, helping them navigate the system that had failed him. Morrison and Brennan were convicted on multiple federal charges. The investigation revealed that they had framed at least 15 other people over a 5-year period. All of those cases were overturned, and the city paid millions of dollars in settlements to the victims. The police department was forced to implement new procedures for evidence handling and arrest reporting. Body cameras became mandatory and could not be turned off during arrests. A civilian oversight board was established to investigate complaints of police misconduct. Sarah Chen was promoted to senior public defender and became the coordinator of the Veterans Advocacy Program. She had found her calling in defending those who had served their country and been forgotten by the system. Judge Williams received commendations from veterans organizations across the country for her handling of the case. She became a national advocate for veterans' rights and judicial reform. But perhaps the most important change was in Marcus himself. The trial had not just cleared his name, it had restored his sense of purpose. He realized that his mission was not over when he left the military. He still had a duty to serve, just in a different way. Marcus began speaking at high schools and colleges about military service and the challenges veterans face when returning home. He worked with lawmakers to improve VA services and housing, programs for homeless veterans. He became a voice for those who had served their country and been abandoned by it. 1 year after his arrest, Marcus stood in the same park where he had been framed. But this time, he was not homeless. He was not hopeless. He was not alone. A small ceremony was taking place to dedicate a new veterans memorial in Riverside Park. Judge Williams was there, along with Sarah Chen and Colonel Patterson, who had flown in from Washington. Mayor Jennifer Walsh gave a speech about the city's commitment to supporting veterans. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he walked to the podium with the same military bearing he had always carried. But now it was backed by renewed confidence and purpose. "A year ago, I was sleeping on a bench in this park," Marcus began.